I fully understand why as a homeowner. It's a basic fact of life. The average American has a horrible stigma against mobile home parks and the residents. And nobody wants a park to go up near where they live or even a business they own. If you simply go to Zillow and look at the single family home price next to a park, it's about half of what it is a block away. Same home, right?
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Frank Rolfe has been an investor in mobile home parks for almost 30 years and has owned and operated hundreds of mobile home parks during that time. He is currently ranked with his partner Dave Reynolds as the 5th largest mobile home park owner in the United States. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Pleasure's mine. 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show, 90 seconds or less. Where did you start? Where are you now? How did you get there?
Where did I start? I started off straight out of Stanford trying to do a business school application. And back then you would start a business to have a good application. So that's how I started my billboard company. So that was my early origins of being an entrepreneur. What was your second question?
Where did you start? Second question, where are you now?
Where am I now? Well, I'm 5th largest owner with my partner Dave Reynolds of mobile home parks in the United States. So we've done a lot of scaling over the last 40 years of being in business for myself.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And the last question is maybe we'll spend the rest of this episode talking about it. How did you get there?
Basically, how I got there was working like an absolute maniac for most of the time. Obviously, having a good strategy. Some businesses you can expand and others you cannot. And then finally, just being outright lucky because there's plenty of guys with more ability than I've got who just were not in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having dinner with some guys the other day, big finance guys. And somebody brought up that idea that some of it's just luck. It's just you be in the right place at the right time. They're like, man, there's more truth to that than you realize, that it's just, you're just at the right place at the right time and it worked out. So that's really interesting. The mobile home park and the RV park space has really changed here, I'd say, in the last 10 to 15 years. It's gained a lot of attraction, a lot of attention from not just individual investors, but also, as you well know, from institutional investors. What have been the changes most dramatic and noticeable to you, and how has it impacted your business?
Well, the biggest change, of course, has been financing, because when I got in it 25 years ago in the mid-90s, you could not get bank debt. So every deal you tried to do, the number one hurdle you had was getting financing. Banks hated it. Nobody liked it. And normally you would end up with seller financing. You try and cobble together something with seller financing, and the sellers were amenable because they knew there was no bank debt. Right. So that's the one big shift. Today, deals rarely go unbankable. Right. Back in the 90s, everything was unbankable. So that's one biggie. Another one has been just the appetite for affordable housing. We've set over the last 9 quarters, each quarter, we broke the record of the prior quarter as far as sales. And what's going on is just the nation's housing industry has absolutely gone nuts on pricing. And so we're producing houses at a price range of, in the 300,000s. And so there's so many people who cannot get into the housing market. It's insane. Right. And while with our industry, you don't own both home and land, you do at least own home and you have some land, unlike apartments. So we're kind of this crossover product between apartments, which don't give you that single family home lifestyle at all. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of like a step between that and actual normal single family.
What? So yeah, the bankability of things has changed. The interest in this space too. I mean, cap rates in mobile home park, as far as I understand, and I don't own any mobile home parks, but from an outsider's view, it just looks like they just keep compressing. How are people finding value right now?
Well, they're not really compressing. What they're doing is they're going down, but people are still having to buy a spread between the interest rate and the cap rate. Banks are not nuts in our industry. In office buildings, retail centers back in the day, people were doing crazy financing, right? Just 100% or 110% LTV at 1% interest. People have never on the lending side been that nutty. So, we have to get loans, and to have loans, we have to have a 1.2 times coverage ratio to the mortgage. A lot of banks stress test our mortgages. They'll say, what happens if you lost 10% of your revenue?
Right.
So what you're seeing is interest rates are historically very low. Even today, they're at roughly 4% on many mobile home park deals. When I got in the business, they were at 7%.
Right.
So, it's not like in our industry that the cap rates are unsustainably whacked out. What the big difference has been that interest rates are low. Another factor is, in our industry, the big narrative is that our lot rents are crazy, stupid low, which when you even say that, I get nothing but hate mail, but it's just a fact. And, our national mobile home park lot rent is $280 a month. The average apartments, I think, it's $1,600 a month.
Right.
So our pricing is stupid. And as institutional buyers are buying this stuff up, they're raising the rents up significantly because they're stupid and because the rates cannot remain. I mean, most of these parks today at the current rates, you're better off just bulldozing them. There's a million uses for the land better than a mobile home park. So as institutional guys go in and drive the rents up, the banks and the appraisers have taken note how easy it would appear to be 100% occupied at a 280 rent and still be 100% occupied at a 580 rent. So they're starting to factor in perhaps the first or second rent increase into their appraised value. So that's the other phenomenon you're seeing. Because a lot of times when we buy a park, we're not even looking at mom and pop's cap rate because mom and pop is running that business so poorly. It's a joke. What the banks and the appraisers and sophisticated buyers are doing is they're looking at the raw material, what they can make out of it.
That's a really clear explanation. I think that makes a lot of sense. That I hadn't really considered is how you guys are seeing it through the bank, through the appraiser's eyes versus maybe what mom and pop are putting together on it. Are you guys buying actively right now? Are you?
Yes. Yeah, we're always buying. We have periods in which we buy more than others, but we've never had a period in which we were not buying.
What does opportunity look like for you right now?
Well, our tastes have changed significantly over the years, right? Both Dave and I, when we started out, and we didn't start out together, we were actually competitors in the old days. Our deals were very, very rough and tumble, what we call heavy lift turnarounds. So I was buying parks that were often half empty, totally screwed up, water leaks running down the streets, stuff like that. So is Dave. Today, because of our size, we're trying to add on to our portfolio what we call portfolio builders, which are nicer properties that help the overall value. But at the same time, we still do heavy lift turnarounds. Now, the one style we're not as in tune with today as we were before are ones in which you have to do massive lot filling by bringing in homes. And that's because home prices have gone up nearly double during COVID. So while it was fun to fill lots at $30,000 a home, it's not as much fun at $60,000 a home.
Well, not only that, but I've also heard that finding homes is difficult.
It's very, very hard right now. I don't think it'll ever go back to the old ways, to be honest with you. What happened was that, our manufacturing, it was at 400,000 units back in the late 90s. Today, it's about 100,000 units. It's been about 100,000 units for, the last 15 years. Nobody wants to step out and increase production. They easily could because the plants are only running one shift and they could run 3. So they typically produce 7 floors a day. The average plant could produce 21 floors a day. But no one wants to take the gamble because half of all the mobile homes sold, roughly, it's estimated, are park owners who are buying the homes to bring into their own parks. Right. And then the question is, how much longer will that go on before people get full? It's not like eating out where you have to eat out. You eat daily, so maybe you'll eat out, in perpetuity a certain number of times a week. In our industry, once you fill a lot, that's it. It's over. So people just don't want to stick their neck out.
No, and I completely get that, and that's a very interesting. You would think though that there's still some old supply going offline at some point. I mean, obviously there's going to be some demand, but you're saying that there's going to be kind of a point where they hit the wall and they can no longer keep up with running 3 shifts a day. So.
Yeah, well, right. Here's the problem. See, the average American cannot buy a mobile home. If you walked right now into a mobile home dealership, you will find you have to have better credit and worser terms to buy a mobile home than a stick build, because the government stands behind and promotes the stick build industry. So they allow people to do these very, very low down payment, all these different programs for first time buyers and veterans and all this stuff. None of that exists in our space. So in our industry, you're looking at a high interest rate, a much larger percent down than single family. And so you can't do it. And the only reason that homes get bought today, half of all home production, is because the park owners backstop those loans.
Right.
So if I bring in a $50,000 home, I don't co-sign the note, but I guarantee the lender, if the person is foreclosed on, I won't charge lot rent, and I will go ahead and rehab the home at my own cost, and I will sell it at my own cost. And that's the only reason they will do it. And until the government wants to stand behind the industry and support it, which they've elected never to do, that will never change. If the government wanted to do that, which they easily could, then you could see greater sales.
Right. And which, that opens another can of worms. I probably won't go down that road. I'm thinking more along the lines of building new parks. Why aren't we seeing, maybe I'll ask that question differently. What is the challenge outside of maybe the political challenge of building new parks? Why don't we see other new parks coming online?
Well, you never will. Okay. I've been in the business 25 years, and I don't think in any given year you've seen more than 10 new parks ever built and about 100 torn down. So we've been depleting continuously. Here's the problem, and you can't blame the cities for it. I fully understand why as a homeowner. It's a basic fact of life. The average American has a horrible stigma against mobile home parks and the residents. And nobody wants a park to go up near where they live or even a business they own. If you simply go to Zillow and look at the single family home price next to a park, it's about half of what it is a block away. Same home, right? So the citizens go in an uproar if you try and build a new mobile home park. And of course, all their elected representatives on the city council, they're not wanting to get all the citizens to vote them all out over some stupid mobile home park. So they just will not grant the zoning. They haven't granted zoning in the United States for mobile home park in any significant amount since the 1970s. So it's been a half a century now, and it's never going to change because there's a basic fundamental truth that, and you'd have to change the entire attitude of Americans towards trailer parks before you could achieve that. And that is never going to happen. No one is ever going to spend $100 billion in public relations money to achieve that.
Right.
And that's why you won't see it. But even then, if you wanted to build one today, what you would have to do is you'd have to go way out in the countryside where there are no people to complain, where there are no zoning laws. And then you have no municipal water, no municipal sewer, and no customers. Right. So what's the purpose of building that? Right. So that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other headwinds that come to mind? And that in its own right, depleting supply is good for you as a park owner in the sense that the value of the park goes up. It's bad for the end user in the sense that we are once again losing more affordable housing and not replacing it or building new. So that's bad for the end user. Are there other headwinds in the mobile home park space that you can think of?
Well, what killed the mobile home parks before was back in their heyday, which was in the 50s and 60s. What killed it was mass prosperity when people all suddenly got rich and they all moved out, right? So you had that period in America, which it's hard to even remember back that far, but I was alive during that period, when America was doing really well. And every year people were making more money. And as people became more affluent, they were buying homes in subdivisions. And everything was great. And I don't know when you were born, but if you remember back in the 60s, the atmosphere in America was very, very much different. We were really rolling at that time. And so the question is to defeat affordable housing. In other words, if you wanted to destroy all mobile home parks, it's simple. Just bring back mass prosperity, and then no one needs mobile home parks. They just all go buy custom homes wherever they can build, 500,000, million, whatever, on the golf course, But I don't see that happening. That would be the single biggest event that would kill the industry off. Right. The only other items you have circling around in some of the blue states, you have rent control. People talk about it frequently. Remember that in the entire United States, only one state has statewide rent control, and that's Oregon. So, current score is 49 no, 1 yes. You've got 4 or 5 other states that allow it on a city by city basis. But, it's not a red state phenomenon. But if you have a mobile home park in a blue state, they seem to threaten it every year. They never pass it because they have no desire to ever pass it, because the folks that run government are all being subsidized by a whole lot of folks who do a lot of real estate ownership and development. So they're not really going to say, hey, I'll give you my big political contribution. Despite the fact you screwed me over with rent control, so I don't see that really happening. So no, I don't really see any big headwinds to the industry. But then again, America is so screwed up at this point. Every day is a new headwind. So who knows? Who knows where we'll be by the end of the day?
Right. Well said. Well said. Tell me about the RV parks, because you guys are also well-known RV park owners. And I know you kind of lump the two together. For our listeners, maybe can you tell us why you lump them together? And then is there really a difference?
Yeah, sure. Well, you have to lump them together because remember that they were all the same family up through the 1960s. So it was all called the trailer industry. You had trailer park and you had travel trailer.
Yeah.
And it was all trailer.
Right.
And what happened was a trailer manufacturer called Selby had a customer who wanted an even fancier, more expensive travel trailer. And they called up the state of Ohio and they said, is there any way I could build this guy an even bigger travel trailer? And the state said, yeah, you know what? We'll let you go up 2 additional feet in width, but he can't pull it with his car. He'll have to pull it with a commercial vehicle. And that was the start of the industry splitting, because what happened was people who wanted to not move their travel trailer frequently, but wanted to have something bigger, that became the mobile home. Whereas the traditional RV person came the travel trailer. The biggest difference in the industry, to be honest with you, is the amazing job the RV industry has done with public relations, contrasted to the terrible job the mobile home park industry has. So the Go RVing campaign is considered one of the most successful marketing campaigns in American history. The average American scores RVs very, very highly in status and in satisfaction. So it's such a night and day difference. It's like you have 2 brothers. One goes off to win the Heisman Trophy, be elected president, and the other brother ends up, dropping out of junior college and becomes a sanitary engineer, even though they were the same industry at one time. Right. So when you deal in RV, it's a luxury product. It's more of a classy customer, and it is something that everyone loves, right? Just as everyone hates trailer park, mobile home parks, so they love RV parks.
They do.
So it's a different kind of a business. Now, the main problem you have is that RV is in fact a business, whereas mobile home parks is very, very static. People never move around. They sit there. An average tenancy is 14 years. They pay rent. You fix it when the utility pipes break. But an RV is like going in a restaurant, right? It's much more active. So you have to have customer service. And if you don't, they'll just go down the street to somebody who does. So that's the key difference. There's a risk profile difference between the two. A lot of lenders, to offset that, they'll set the cap rate 2 points higher on RV than mobile home park, because they want that extra comfort that if you're a lousy operator, that even though you screw up, you can still cover the mortgage.
Right.
Whereas mobile home park, our managers on their worst manager ever, we probably won't lose any customers. We'll probably have property condition issues, maybe a couple collections problems. But an RV park with a bad manager can just wipe your RV park out.
Right. Absolutely. We've seen some incredible tailwinds in the RV space here just with deliveries in 2020, 2021, and then, 2022 projected deliveries are just through the roof.
Yep.
Where do you see, and I think the other unique thing that I've seen in the RV park industry is that people are or cities are amenable to RV park development.
Yep.
So where do you see that going? Does this just peter out when people get tired of the pandemic and finally try to put that behind us, or does that have runway? Well,
for a long time, people thought RVs were not going to be a long-term thing because the majority of RV owners were baby boomers, my generation. And what they thought was going to spur it on to greatness would be a burst, as you have, there's 10,000 boomers retiring a day.
Right.
I mean, I'm 61, so next year would technically be where I would retire if I was in a normal job.
Right.
So, but what came out of nowhere that they did not anticipate was the millennials. Millennials are now as bigger a buyer of RVs than the boomers were.
Right.
And that I think you have to tie that to the phenomenal success of the Go RVing campaign. Right. They were doing like, all those Monster Energy extreme events. They were marketing at those way back in the day. I mean, they had real foresight. Whoever was running that marketing, they knew what they were doing. They didn't just focus on boomers. They could have just only promoted programs that appeal to boomers, right? Like the Golden Girls or, golf tournaments. But no, they deliberately went after millennials on all of their most edgy millennial stuff. And as a result, they score very highly with them. And they are now half or more of all RV sales.
Right.
So you have all these young people with RVs now. And so that's what's given the industry a whole new life, because I didn't see that one coming, nor did anyone. That was a gift from the gods. And then of course, the other part was COVID. I mean, let's be honest, COVID is one of the best things that ever happened to the RV industry, right? What happened was people now want to be outdoors. Some people have never been outdoors before. Right. They didn't want to go somewhere without a mask. People said, oh, well, you can walk around without a mask. They were like, oh, holy smokes, man, I've never been outdoors before. What the heck? I like that. And also people now just don't like being around other people's nastiness. They don't want to go to hotels and stuff because they don't know who slept in the bed or who coughed on the remote. And so when they're in an RV, they feel like they have that safety from germs and strangers and all that. So I don't really see that going away. The one part of the industry that someone will have to come to a conclusion with at some point is that, a lot of people prefer retiring and living in RVs over mobile homes because of that stigma issue, which you'll never solve.
Right.
So, and I myself know a college professor who recently sold his house, like a $500,000 house, and bought an RV. Okay. He's a single guy, and he just decided to sell everything and retire and bank the whole thing and just live in his RV. He would have never lived in a mobile home in a million years. He could never have culturally survived that, but he can. The problem is a lot of cities, the RVs are not allowed to remain more than a certain number of days.
Right.
So those people end up in this nomadic existence. So what you need is kind of a hybrid. You need an RV park that you can retire in and live permanently. And that's going to be the real challenge. See, when the cities grant these RV permits, traditionally, they won't allow anyone to be there more than a certain number of days.
Right.
Right. And they do that deliberately because they are afraid if they do, there's an underworld of RV of these kind of nomadic, freaky people who roam around. They don't want them. Right. You don't want the guy that was living under the bridge down by the river.
Right.
Right. That's not your goal. That's the real missing piece right now. And the same with tiny homes, right? Tiny homes can't go on a traditional mobile home lot because they don't have the HUD seal. So what happens is, you see them on TV, but there's nowhere to put them.
Right.
And again, so that's the missing piece. And so I think at some point in the movie, maybe in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, people will figure all this out. And maybe cities will allow what would be more of an upscale retirement kind of community that allows for tiny homes and things that are do not have HUD seals, but yet don't have to move frequently. I think that's the only missing piece the industry has.
That's really interesting. I had not even considered that side of the equation before, but that is really interesting. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in the RV park space is, the long-term tenant, though, when you get outside of those city regulations, of course. I mean, you have people that park their RVs and leave them there for 12 months and come in every other weekend and have a good time. So it's really, really intriguing. Frank, thank you for taking the time to come on today and talk all about mobile home parks and RV parks. Certainly a blast. I've enjoyed it, learned a ton about both sides of the business. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about you and what you guys are doing, what is the best way to do that?
Well, the best way to find my writings and all my different things is just go to mhu.com. Just the letters mhu.com. You'll find so much of me you can't handle it.
Frank, thank you again. I do appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks a lot.